Welcome to the Random Encounters Show. I'm Deathstalker 5 coming in for another episode of Table Talk. A very late night episode of Table Talk. Past 3 a.m. in the morning episode of Table Talk. I don't have a clock in here and I don't have my phone on me. So you can just trust though it's after 3 a.m. Coming in from my little painting studio in the back of the Fortress of Doom. For all you regulars around here, you know the rules, so let's follow the rules. Make sure to have something to drink. In this episode, I'm sticking with Spriker. I'm back onto their fire brewed root beer. Literally the best root beer I've ever tasted in my life. Highly, highly, highly recommended. Here in America, you can find these and many other flavors of their soda at the Dollar Tree stores, believe it or not. Yeah, I love their stuff. Anybody working for Spriker that sees these videos, please recommend to your marketing team the show. We've got some big stuff going on, and we could definitely use some sponsorship. Yeah. Anyway, for those of you that are just dropping in, you're new around here, you're most welcome. You know, we're glad for all of our new people coming in, new viewers and such. I want to make you aware that we have a vibrant, just amazing community surrounding the show. So if you're interested in the community, we're all together. The big focus is a lot of solo tabletop RPGers, but also board games, war games, skirmish games, classic console and computer games. We talk about it all. Yeah, we're just a bunch of hobbyists that just share the hobby. It's such a positive thing, and I've made so many friends. There's links down below to our Facebook page and group, as well as our Discord server for the show. You know, take a look around. By all means, if you're interested, please join. We love each and every person that joins our community. Yeah? Forgive me if I talk a little bit weird. It's been a minute since I've been on camera, and I'm dead tired. So what are we doing for this episode? We're going to be taking a look at a tabletop RPG that I picked up earlier this year. And so far, it really hasn't seemed to get much coverage or talk around the community. And it is Gunslinger, Strange Science in the Arizona Territory from Night Owl Workshop. Yeah? And what are we gonna do with this? For this episode, we're going to talk about this RPG rule set, what it entails and such. We're going to be giving a review of it. I have been able to get it to the table, give it some play. For our members here on the channel, under the Rogues Gallery, our subscribers that pay for the membership, you know, earlier this year, I showed this off and we got it. And as promised, we're back here for the review after I played it a bit. But yeah, we'll give it a review. And then we'll actually just do a quick flip through of the book and take a look at different sections of it. Now, the big thing to keep in mind is that I have not prepared for this in any kind of way. I'm not following a script or a transcript or anything like that. That's the way I like to do it. Yeah? We'll go through things, and you can rest assured that you're actually getting the mind and heart of a hobby gamer, instead of a pre-written thing up to try to sell books or gain sponsorships from channels and stuff. That's how we roll around here. Yeah? So forgive me if I misspeak or anything like that. We will self-correct as best we can. Anyway, how are you guys all doing? Yeah? Peachy, right? Anyway, I want to talk about Gunslinger. I first want to start off, let's just read the back so you can get a general idea of what's going on here. Strange things are stirring at the Sierra Bonita Ranch. Gunslinger is a science fantasy role-playing game inspired by classic westerns and the pulp fiction of the early 20th century. Bring justice to the Wild West. Explore ancient ruins and the Arizona underworld. Discover things mankind was not meant to know. Uncover unspeakable conspiracies. Gunslinger utilizes elements from various editions. Sorry, the root beer is about to come up. Of the original fantasy role-playing game. I mean, people unsubscribe now. And related systems to create a fresh yet familiar game that is simple and plays fast and still has plenty of options. Yeah? Let me get another drink of root beer to wash that previous root beer on down. No one promised you that this show would be undisgusting. Yeah, you got me up here. What do you want? Yeah, let's just talk about Gunslinger for a second. You guys know me, and when I talk about this will give you an idea of how I approach gaming, a new system, whatever. But also why I think what I think when we talk about more of the review and overview of the game as we look inside the book. But for me, you guys already know that I'm a proponent, and I've done a video on it, of instead of having 10,000 different role-playing games, I choose to have core games, rule sets, materials, as much as I can to handle as much gaming as I can. So my core library, it's 5 games or so, and it handles my main areas of gaming, fantasy, and science fiction. Yeah, there's plenty of other systems and stuff I have to handle things as well, but that's generally how I roll. I consider myself a hobby gamer. That if I have a game idea, I want my core rules, the various rules I have in my library, to be able to handle whatever idea I may have. So when it comes to looking at new games, etc., I always look and say, would my core library be able to handle that game? And the answer is almost always yes. But there's particular genres and stuff that it just, you're probably better off served by grabbing a game. And to, I don't know, my great detriment, a lover of westerns, both movies and shows, novels and such, I've never owned a western RPG. When I say western, I mean the old west or wild west of the United States throughout the 1800s. Yeah? But, I said that's wild. I've never really thought to pick up a western RPG as much as I love that genre. I've had western games, board games and such, but not an RPG. And Gunslinger actually came to my attention because one of my favorite board games, or western style games, that I've owned is Gunslinger by Avalon Hill. Came out in, I think, 81 or 82. Yeah, it was a very expansive skirmish game that broke into RPG territory at the time. But we're not here to review and talk about Gunslinger of Avalon Hill. We're talking about Gunslinger of Night Owl Workshop. But yeah, having my core systems, when I'm looking at another game, there's a few things I'm going to want out of this. Number one is I don't want a big, expansive game. Yeah? I normally seek out titles that will normally be one core rule book will be all that you need. As far as your rules, your mechanics, your setting material, your NPCs and such like that. They're rare, but they're out there. I don't want my shelf space is precious and my bank account is low. I don't want to buy a game where I need 2, 3, 4, 5 or more books to really be able to bring the game to the table and do whatever I want to with it out of my imagination. I'm looking at you, Mongoose Traveler. Yeah? So yeah, Gunslinger fits that bill perfectly, as you'll see when we go into the book. It has all your rule mechanics. It's all set up for you to play, the setting, the classes, monsters, etc. Game master tools, pretty much everything that you'll need to be able to run the game as it's presented, but also add elements and add things from your own imagination. Such as if you wanted to run this game, I don't know, outside of Arizona. Maybe you wanted to run it in Texas, or maybe you wanted to run it in New York City. I don't know. You know, everything's there that if you want to change the setting and make your own adventures and stuff, it's quite easy to do. So it ticks that box for me. Another element is I'm primarily a solo player. When I say primarily, I would say 90% of all the gaming I've ever done over decades has been as a solo gamer. I always look to rule sets and RPG books that will contain a lot of GM tools, as you might know them. You know, tables, ways to build things, ways to interpret things, etc. Game master tools, world building tools, encounter building tools, etc. Those all equate to me as solo gaming tools. Regardless if it's written for solo or not, that's what I use. Gunslinger definitely ticks the box there big time. We'll talk more about it as a solo game when we get to really reviewing the game. The other thing about Gunslinger and that I look for is having my core games. Those are the rules that I'm really familiar with and that I keep in my memory. You know, I notice when people do a lot of game jumping, they're playing this, they're playing that, they're playing this system, that system, this system, that system, is that many people, they can't stay fluent in the rules that you're using. Yeah, because basically every time you use another system, you're having to relearn how to play an RPG. So it's very important to me that if I buy a game like this, that I'm going to use sporadically at best, I want it to be based on a rule system that I'm already familiar with. Gunslinger is based on the OSR OGL D&D clone. So the D&D system. So I'm very familiar with that. Very easy to just open the book, briefly go over any rules, note any changes to those rules, and get to playing. Yeah? So yeah. Where do we go from here? I guess if that sounds interesting to you, we'll go ahead and continue what I'm talking about more as a review. And by the way, if Gunslinger interests you, listen to me. Our affiliate link directly to Gunslinger on DriveThruRPG, where this is available as a PDF, softcover, hardcover, etc., is in the description of this video. It's very important that you use the affiliate links because it supports the show. Yeah? For the Random Encounter Army, always remember to use the affiliate link if you can. Yeah, I asked nicely. You know, even if you're not buying Gunslinger, anytime you shop at DriveThruRPG, which we know that we all do, yeah, come over to the show on the About page. Just click on the affiliate link to take you to DriveThruRPG and do your shopping. It costs you nothing at all extra, but DriveThru's kind enough to give us a little kickback off of every sale that we make through our affiliate link system. Yeah? And what do I use that money for off DriveThruRPG? I only use it to go in and buy interesting looking RPG material, supplements, etc. that I want to take a look at and maybe bring to the show and say, hey, look at this wonderful thing I found for you guys. Yeah? So anyway, link to DriveThruRPG in the description below. Overall, Gunslinger. I had a few worries about it when I first purchased it. Yeah? And I was apprehensive. I said, I'll buy it though. It wasn't very expensive. I can't remember how much I paid. I believe it was 20 something for a hardcover book. Nice. But I was a little bit apprehensive. First off, my first worry was it being on the OGL D&D clone system. Because what I did not want is a Western, basically playing Dungeons and Dragons in the Old West. Yeah? I didn't want that. Dungeons and Dragons and that associated system does fine for fantasy, but other times I've seen when it's broken to other genres like science fiction and stuff, it really falls flat for me. So I'm happy to report that Gunslinger, let me look at the author's name here. David Pulver. You'll see that when we open the book. But Night Owl Workshop, David Pulver, whoever created Gunslinger, they did utilize those D20 familiar mechanics from D&D and such. But instead of just throwing D&D into the Old West, they really crafted all aspects of the game to meet the genre. So it really, even though you're using the mechanics of D&D, it does not feel like playing Dungeons and Dragons necessarily on the table. Yeah? That was one worry I had about this game. That at first, even reading the game, at first I felt like, yeah, this is going to be Dungeons and Dragons. You know, sitting down and, knights and scouts and, rangers and stuff like that with guns. In some ways it does reflect that, but like I said, at the table it doesn't. So, like I said, I don't like to review things or even talk about them necessarily until we get them to the table, because that's the true test. That's where you're going to find out what the game's really about. Another thing that I was sort of apprehensive about was that it's a Weird West RPG. Yeah? And I like Weird West kind of stuff, but I didn't want the game to be solely focused on that, like a game like Deadlands from the 90s. I think that's still around, where it's a whole bunch of undead and magic and everything. You know what I'm talking about. I didn't want that. So the game's sole focus is on that. And I'm very happy with Gunslinger, because Gunslinger is presented in a way that you could easily play in a historic Western RPG, or you could play a science fiction sort of RPG in a Western setting, or your Weird West, Horror West, whatever you want to say. The rules are written in a way that this is a very much a hobby-oriented game, that this gives you things to work with. And I'm very much appreciative of that. Like I said, I love the Western genre. I also love things like H.P. Lovecraft style of horror. So for me, being able to incorporate the Western genre and add in that Lovecraftian style horror and stuff into that, it's just a home run for me. But even if you played it as just a historical, no nonsense, no weird science or anything like that, this game would still be good. It would still fit the bill. I believe I read in the book a while back that the game actually started off as sort of a setting for John Carter, the first few chapters or whatever of John Carter and the Red Planet. An Edward Rice Burroughs novel. It's been turned into movies and stuff. They created the setting for it because they have another RPG. I believe it's called The Warriors of the Red Planet. It's been a minute since I looked. You guys can see it on drive-through. But I believe it began as a setting for those first few chapters of that book for that game world, but it eventually evolved into its own RPG that's still compatible with the Red Planet, whatever. This game's going to be very compatible with any of the D&D clones out there, including D&D itself of various editions. We'll see that when we dive in. But yeah, I like that it's very much a hobby game, that it does a very good job of representing the genre to a point where you can add or remove as you see fit for your own game at the table. This is very much a rule set that is a toolbox for crafting things. So overall, I like the artwork of the book. This may be AI artwork. I don't know, because there's no artist listed anywhere in the book. If it is AI art, it is quite good. Somebody knew what they were doing programming it. Am I a fan of AI art in the industry? Not necessarily, even though I do understand its usage by very small, especially if it's like a one-man team or whatever, to get their rules out and make them visibly present. You know, there's nothing like an RPG book with no art in it whatsoever. Yeah, I would rather have AI art in a book than just text. Yeah, so, and we see the way things are going across the world with AI. That's a whole nother video if you want to talk about AI and my feelings on AI and such. But regardless, I'm not saying that this book is filled with AI art. I'm just saying that they don't list an author. If it is AI art, it is the best AI art I've seen in a while. Yeah, we'll take a look. There's an example on the back cover of some horsemen riding through town. Yeah, some indicative things that I do to look for AI art is like count fingers and things like that. I haven't seen any missing digits or anything like that, so I don't know. I'm telling you, I don't know about it. But the artwork, regardless of who or what created it, is generally good and fits the setting and genre of the book. So yeah, at the table, this plays very well. Of course, it's more of a Western setting, so the focus is more on horseback adventures. If you're going to do an adventure style thing, which this does well, but it's set up for more of your classic D&D style adventures, I would say, sort of as a party going out and exploring things, investigating things, helping people, etc. So a lot of horseback in riding in the game, and most of the combat and such is normally going to be handled with the old long iron, you know, a pistol, a revolver, a rifle, shotgun, etc. Yeah? Now, there's one criticism I have talking about combat here, is that the damages and ranges of various ranged weapons and such seem off to me in various ways. We'll look at that table. We'll look at the range table in here as we go in. But many games, RPGs, feel off for me in that aspect. You know, for someone that I grew up on a farm, I was taught to shoot guns at an early age. I've owned many guns. I enjoy shooting guns. I've hunted. I've worked in law enforcement. I've done martial arts. So I know about knife throwing and tomahawks. I know about shooting shotguns, revolvers, automatic pistols, rifles, etc. Many games for tabletop, the gun stuff seems way off to me. Yeah, and I think primarily it's because, I don't know, maybe it's that many authors and such, especially those that don't live here in America where we have guns everywhere, right? I've got a gun on me right now. You think I'm shooting this video unprotected? Anyway, it seems like many authors and stuff just really aren't familiar with guns. Gunslinger does a better job than others that I have seen, where they don't understand the difference between like a revolver and a magazine-fed pistol. Yeah? So it's not terrible. The biggest probably things that are off to me are the ranges. Yeah, we'll take a look at it, but like just for an example, Gunslinger, for the listed optimal ranges or whatever, a player can throw a tomahawk 2.5 times the distance than a shotgun covers. Yeah, that just seems off to me. You know, many of the distances seem way too close. You know, like pistols' optimal range is like, some of them are like 20 feet, 30 feet. I'm sorry, but that's very close for pistol fighting. I'm not saying that pistol fights don't happen at those range, but for an optimal range, that seems a little bit weird. You know, that anything beyond those starts taking penalties. And you could always make the argument that in the heat of battle, it might be hard to hit somebody 20 feet away or whatever. But take in consideration that your characters are going to be people that are trained and familiar with firearms. They've used them throughout their lives. So in the heat of battle, they're going to have a better range than 20 or 30 feet with any firearm you give them. Yeah, so yeah, that's my one sort of complaint about this. But we're hobby gamers, guys. If you get a game like Gunslinger and the ranges seem off to you, there's nothing preventing you from giving them your own ranges. Yeah, so not a huge complaint. Not a huge complaint. One other thing I want to say about Gunslinger before we dive into this is that it being sort of an OGL D&D clone style game. Well, there's a few more things I want to say before we go take a look at it. But it being on the OGL sort of system, D&D clone style game, it's very easy to pull materials from other games. You know, it's very easy to say, bust open the Castles and Crusades Monsters and Treasures book and throw in some monsters into this game straight from there. Our Swords and Wizardry Tome of Horrors, for example. You want to get some Eldritch horrors to throw in here? Chunk them in. The other side of that is it's very easy to adapt adventure modules and such over to this system. Yeah? One of my favorite adventure modules of all time, and it has stood the test of time, is to Keep on the Borderlands, B2. Yeah? That's prime for a Western game. Take out the fantasy bits, replace it with Western bits, and you've got a hit game. Look at Keep on the Borderlands. It's basically a Western with the fantasy world around it. You know what I mean? Instead of slinging guns, they're slinging swords and arrows. Not very hard to swap that over, genre swap, and use this rule system and play that D&D module. And you could find many other modules where you could do the same. You could find various bits and pieces from module that you want to throw into your game. Solo-wise, this gets a big thumb up from me. As you will see, we'll discuss it. It pretty much has, in its game master tools and its world building tools, it pretty much has everything you need at a basic level other than an oracle. You know, use my common sense oracle. I made a video on it. It's the only video we've had that's done super big. Well, not really super big, but for us, super big. But the common sense oracle, you know, it's so useful across the board that anything you want to know an answer for or find out or use it for, just use a common sense percentage number and roll against it. Yeah, that can be for social encounters, etc. But like I said, at a basic level, most all you're going to need for solo gaming's in here. And yeah, I'm very, very, very happy that I went on a limb and purchased this unknown game just based off of its name and its genre. I'm very happy with the purchase, and I highly recommend that if you think you'd be interested in Gunslinger, go grab a copy. Affiliate link down below, like I said. For a few more little tidbits before we go to looking in the book and getting out of here, because we're already, almost 30 minutes in. If you're trying to picture what the Weird West setting is, I picked out two movies from my DVD collection, and you may be familiar with to get an idea. Gunslinger could easily run something like Cowboys and Aliens, starring Harrison Ford. Yeah? This was about a Western town community that was attacked by aliens, you know, that combined science fiction and Western. Pretty decent movie. Pretty decent movie. Wouldn't make my top list of anywhere, but for what it is, pretty decent movie. A movie that probably does make my top list sometimes is The Burrowers. Yeah, we'll be checking this one out on our members-only movie nights. Coming soon. Coming soon. Been saying that for a while, but definitely coming soon. The Burrowers, I think it's available on Tubi right now. And Amazon Prime. That's what that is. Maximus was telling me. This is a horror that's based in Wyoming. It revolves around Native American legends and such, and this is a spooky movie. It's rated R. But this is a really spooky movie. As a horror movie or as a western, this one's good. This one's good. Watch out for the mole people, yeah. But stuff like that, you know. Then also, if you're a fan of like Louis L'Amar's books, Louis L'Amarr, I don't know. Americans with French names, you never know which way it's going to go. John Williamstone, Western novels and such, more historical novels and such. This game's going to be able to run it all. It's highly recommended. Yeah? It's highly recommended. Anyway, let me turn the camera around here on the workbench and let's just dive off into this book and talk about the particulars. Alright, let me get situated here. Brush off the metal filings. This is our hobby desk. Here we go. We're going to dive into this, talk about Gunslinger a little bit more in depth. Yeah? Maybe you need another drink. I don't know. There we can start seeing some of the artwork. The artwork's, mostly line drawings and such, but they, like I said, it gives you a good feeling, regardless of who or what made it. It gives you a good feeling of the Western setting. Of course, it starts off with an introduction of how to play. The one thing this game, this book in particular, the greatest sin that it has is that it does not have an index. But over here, let me get the Sword of Power. Over here we do have a fairly detailed table of contents, so it is somewhat easy to find what you're looking for. But of course we've got our introduction, what is needed to play, how to play, etc. Let me move this over here and get a drink of root beer while I'm here. You get a breakdown of how to create your character. You get some party character ideas, etc. Over here we get a character sheet. Yeah? And then we get into our attributes. This game, of course, you guys know it's important to me that it has an attribute check system, especially as a solo player. That allows you to, especially if you play like me, a lone character, that's sometimes partied up with other characters and stuff, but I'm really getting into this one character because I want to role play it. Having an attribute check system, which you'll see in all the games that I recommend, allows your character to try to do anything that it comes upon. Yeah? Within reason. Within reason. So yeah, here's your attribute. It tells you all about your attributes and such. If you're new to role-playing or you haven't used a D&D style game, definitely read this, understand it. It's going to be very useful throughout the game. If you haven't played in a while or you want a good overview for how this system handles this role-playing system handles attributes, you can take a brief look through here, but it should be fairly familiar for those who've been playing D&D for a while. This game also has a social status. Yeah, that's something that most D&D style clone games, they don't pay attention to because, well, I mean, it is sort of important in many fantasy settings and such, but it's even more important on determining your character in this game. Alignment. Alignment is here. There's 3 different alignments, but it's not like the old school D&D alignment where you have good, neutral, and evil, basically. This is more of your outlook on how you deal with law. Yeah, when I say law, I mean like lawful tries their best to be moral, uphold and obey laws. Neutral cares more about freedom. Chaotic cares more about unconstrained and personal gain than order, etc. Basically, what you're looking at is like lawmen, everybody else, and outlaws. Yeah, you'll see what I mean. Ancestry determines a few things in this game when it comes to your classes and such. They also, you can pick one of these. It provides a table. These type tables, whether they be for the game masters or players, are helpful when it comes to solo gaming, especially for like NPCs and such. So I'll always love seeing even just small things on tables. They're quite useful overall. When it comes to the classes, Like I said, in many ways I didn't want this game to be D&D in the Old West. Uh, and like I said, they did a great job of using the mechanics of D&D, but giving it a real great, just natural feeling Western theme that you would expect from watching movies and such things. But many of the classes and such are based on D&D classes, but like I said, heavily, heavily, heavily modified for the setting and genre. So we have a brave. Like I said, check your ancestry stuff here, because if you're not an Apache, you have to look at how your character is actually going to be a brave. Just like D&D, if you're familiar, you're going to have weapon proficiencies, armor, shields that you're permitted to use, your hit dice and starting hit dice, your primary attribute, alignment allowances, etc. You know, and you get your usual table, level 1 through 10. You get a saving throw matrix, okay, that I typically use attribute checks for saving throws, but, you know, for various games, this could be useful as well, especially if you want to follow more of the old school approach. Over here, you get a list of some special abilities. So you got your brave. Now, what is the brave mostly? What are they? They're the Native American warrior. You know, that they foraged, horsemanship, scouting, war cry, extra attack, etc. Over here we have a doctor. The doctor is basically like a cleric, or like a cleric, your healer in the game. But one thing about these classes, unlike D&D, is that they don't use magic necessarily. They don't use magic necessarily, and each and every class, because combat in this game mostly revolves around firearms, you don't have any really weak classes when it comes to combat and such. You have some that are going to be better than others, but you don't have anybody just, you know, like your magic user in old school D&D that fired off 3 of his spells, and for the rest of the day he's running for his life, you know, at low levels. So you know, your doctor here, he can do your healing and such, non-magical healing, and at higher levels he gets access to medicinal devices. We'll talk about those in a second. Over here we have the engineer. The engineer is basically the replacement of a magic user. In this game, like I said, characters really don't use magic. So what did they use in lieu of magic and magic type things? They use things called gadgets and devices. So your engineer can obtain, create, identify, and work with these gadgets that have spell-like effects that are suited toward the game. So in D&D you have the famous fireball. Here you have like a flamethrower, you know. So there is a conversion over of stuff from D&D, but it, like I said, it puts its own spin on it, so it doesn't feel like D&D at the table, you know. And the engineer, if you wanted to run a more historical campaign, this would be one you would probably leave off. You would probably also alter the doctor as well, so that you take off the science fiction elements of the gadgets and devices that are presented in the book. Over here we have our gunslinger. You know, your typical gunslinger, Clint Eastwood movie style gunslinger. The alignment of the gunslinger determines a lot about the character. So he's either going to be, like I said, a lawman, a drifter, or an outlaw, depending on his alignment. Over here we have a huckster, which is something akin to like a bard and a thief, if you want to think of old school D&D. This is a salesman. This is a guy that talks to people, swindles, escape artist, can go incognito, sleight of hand, repartee. You know, he's somebody that might, you remember the old snake oil salesmen, etc. Selling you oceanfront property in Arizona type deal. Yeah, can be useful for your party for sure. Over here we have a muckraker. A muckraker essentially is a reporter. Whether they are writing reports for newspapers and such, or possibly even doing novels or biographies, etc. That was a big thing in the Old West, was the dime and nickel biographies of supposed legendary gunslingers and such. Yeah? You have your ranger over here, very akin to your D&D ranger. You have your scout, somewhat akin to your D&D classic thief. Yeah? Soldier cavalryman. The cavalier, basically. But like I said, all of these are spent well into the Western genre. They also have a greenhorn, which if you've seen things like Dungeon Crawl Classics, etc., that have sort of starting characters with no class that'll figure out what class they're going to go into, your game master or you as a solo gamer may want to start off a younger character at a greenhorn and see where they fall in. They also give you backgrounds and personality traits. Again, these are on tables, very useful for when you need to generate NPCs either as a game master or for your solo gaming. Let me set the sword of power here for a second. And we're going to sort of pick up the pace here. Goods. I like that they were, I don't know how I want to put it, that they were very complete in a way of just about everything you could think of to go into the setting. These are your weapons. Here is that weapons table. Here are the ranges. You know, like you have the bolas, the 2 weights on a rope thing. You can throw it optimal range around 50 feet. Beyond that, it starts taking penalties. Well, somebody can throw a bola further than an Apache revolver will shoot. You know, your bows and arrows are going 200 feet, and I'm guessing feet. There was a failure in the book to mention at these ranges at what the 50, 40, all these numbers meant, yards, feet, etc. But from the examples, I'm picking up, you know, feet. So, but it's weird for me that like a bow and arrow can shoot 200 feet, but your pistols and things like a double action revolver is ranged at 20 feet. You know, a Gatling gun at 750 feet. While your, you know, a carbine 350. See, stuff like this, the ranges just seem off to me. Yeah, when I played this, because I did this pen and paper, I really don't want to invest in Western miniatures right now. At some point, I probably will, because I really am enjoying some Western style gaming. But I played it pen and paper, and what I did is use from like Cepheus Universal or Traveler or whatever. Instead of having specific feet ranges, I just used the, you know, medium range, long range, very long range, close range, range bands. Makes it much easier to keep up with as a pen and paper game, much faster to play. But you do get a great selection of ranged weapons and goods and such, and you get good explanations of exactly what they are. Because there'll be things that some people may not be familiar with, like a double action revolver. How's that different than a single action? What is a Lamont revolver? Etc. Adventuring equipment goes through the gamut of stuff that your common adventuring party or characters may need. Transportation and livestock, land and shelter, food, drink, and remedies, etc. Like I said, because I like one book resources, and a Western RPG or Weird West RPG is something that I haven't had in my collection for. I'm very grateful to have it be so complete in its listing of setting materials, including the goods, transportation, etc. That's great. Over here we get into basically what you would consider in your D&D book, your spell book. But like I said, instead of spells, these are all gadgets and devices that your engineer can either create, find, build, whatever. Instead of having, you know, like spells where you have to rest, you can do it once a day or whatever. The gadgets and such are actually powered by power packs, some kind of battery, if you will. that those power packs can be collected, bought, etc., recharged, etc., and that's how they power the various devices. And the devices, many of them are spells from D&D, though many of them read them carefully because they have been customized to fit the genre more. Yeah? And there's plenty of things that just are brand new here and not just straight up converted spells over. So, yeah, especially in your Weird West games and such, where there's a science fiction element. Maybe you're visiting an underground ruin that was part of an ancient alien culture and you're finding weird stuff around, etc. This is where this kind of stuff would pick up. So like I said, I really enjoy the artwork here. You've got this giant wasp. They're trying to get its eggs. Looks like out of a cave or something. Yeah? Like I said, the artwork here really, really, really fits the mood, theme, and genre of what they're presenting here. You get a thing on how to play. You know, you get your action flow charts, your attribute checks, how to do contests between attributes, passive checks, like if you're going to check for perception, etc., how save and throws work, etc. This game does include the 5th edition advantage and disadvantage, but also if you want to convert that over to a more old school method, just giving modifications to your D20 rolls. Yeah? There's critical success and failures, etc. I like that they go into pretty heavy treatment over things like moving, lifting, light and visibility, encumbrance, long-term effects of intoxication, etc. All those, like I said, it fits the setting. Much of the setting, if you think of the Wild West, is that, hey, you're out in the desert. This isn't a stroll through the pleasant countryside, village to village, drinking water wherever you find it, and doing a little hunting and all. This is, the desert's basically survival. Yeah? And there's a great emphasis placed within the rule set on surviving in the wilderness. Combat. Combat's mostly utilized like you would expect from D&D. Establishing surprise, establishing initiative, who's going to act first, movement, ranged attacks, etc. Yeah? That's all here, how to handle it. Some things where it will go more into detail is like your ranged weapons. There will be misfires, mounted shooting, ranged attacks into melee situation, cover, half cover, etc. Like I said, the combat's normally going to revolve around shooting bullets at each other, not swinging swords. So they did a very good job at the combat here of reflecting that. That's one of the ways that really makes this game not feel like D&D. And yes, there is melee combat involved, of course. But like I said, for most games, you're going to see a lot of firearm action. You get brawling rules. You get conditions in combat. Blind, dazed, deafened, frightened, grappled, exhausted, restrained, etc. They really, really, really beefed up the combat. Now, most D&D systems include much of this, but they really geared it toward a beefier combat when we get to the next section here. These are showdown rules, but also could be used alternatively for ranged combat. And this is where the combat for firearms and such get much more detailed. You got hit locations, wounds, your initiatives changed a little bit. There's aiming, rushing, evading, etc. And this, of course, covers your Old West showdown at noon on High Street kind of thing, at high noon on Main Street, I should say. But like I said, these rules can be incorporated for just about any ranged combat to give it a lot more detail. And in the appendices of this book, there will be even more detail, especially around wounds and such. Here's our section on wilderness travel and adventure. Again, because this is taking place in Arizona by the setting of the book, a lot of travel and such in the book, especially on foot, but even on horseback and such, is more of a survival game. You know, getting lost in the Badlands, the desert, etc., is very, very detrimental. And not having having a character that doesn't know how to survive and have the abilities and skills and such, it could easily be a death sentence. So, yeah. So we also get about towns resting, buying equipment. We get, like here for solo, we have a negotiations table. Yeah, we have salaries and hirelings, their cost, etc. We get availability of equipment in different places, hiring, etc. All useful for the game master, also solo tools. Then we get into our encounters, and we get encounter tables that very much reflect the Weird West theme of the game. First off, we get encounter reactions. This is basically a social interaction table. Yeah? Very good to have Game Master solo tools. For all the different terrains and such in the game, we get various tables for. And all the stuff on these tables are covered in this book in its sort of monster manual section, as we'll see. When it comes to your human encounters and such, there will be different things that you encounter. You get a table for stuff, also posses, lawmen, traveling peddlers, the U.S. Cavalry Patrol, etc. You get your town human encounters. Again, wonderful tables. Down here you get a class table for your NPC. Like I said, very, very beefy book for world building and such. You get full NPC generator in this book for human NPCs, that is. You get their goals and motivation. You also get stat blocks that you can throw right to your NPC. You know, it makes NPC generation very quick and easy. Then we get into critters, the rules that go along with critters. We get their habitats and such. We get into the treasure generator. Yeah, very important for the Game Master solo RPG, of how to roll up and generate treasure found while out exploring and during combat and such. Then we get into the critters themselves. A very familiar layout and information. If you're used to D&D, you'll see it. But very easy to throw right into your game. Lots and lots of a selection from not only natural animals and such you would expect to find in Arizona, but also some things that are natural you wouldn't expect to find in Arizona, but also things that go toward the Weird West sort of setting, you know, like giant creatures, you know, like giant beetles, giant bats, etc. for your characters and parties to find, along with some typical monsters. Yeah? You get a nice big selection within the core book itself. Like I said, this will probably be just about everything you need for the fauna and flora of encounters in your game. But it's very easy to take any D&D clone style book, like I said, monster manuals, etc., and be able to pull stuff from there as well to add to your game as you see fit. And then we get our experience and gaining levels. We get sort of a game master guide, in a way. Modes of play, campaign styles, hardcore mode about how lethal your encounters are going to be, high stakes gambling, etc. Yeah? How to handle failure in the game. Treasure tables, you get tons of stuff that are just mundane items. Then you get into your strange science items. Think of these sort of like your magical items of D&D and scrolls and such. A lot of interesting stuff that characters could find from this setting. It's very handy to, if you're in a party, to have the engineer to help identify and get these things working. If you're a solo player, it's very handy that if you're going to use the science fiction horror side of this, the weird side of this Western setting, to at least have an engineer that you know. Yeah? And again, here's your charges, just like for the engineer's gadgets and such. These things have batteries, charge packs, solar arrays, etc. Instead of them just recharging overnight or resting or whatever, there's a physical means of how to recharge these and reuse them. And it goes into a great description. Now, a lot of these things, Edward Rice Burroughs, H.P. Lovecraft, Robert E. Howard, etc. A lot of these strange science kind of things feel like they're right out of those early 20th century novels that I'm such a fan of. Yeah? So then we get into more of our setting, the Wild West. We get a map of Arizona broken down. We also get settlements and locations on that map, a general description ready for you to fill out as you go. It talks about like the Apache culture, the Chiricahuas who broke off from the Apaches. We get the Smithsonian, looking for artifacts and such. Easy ways to get your game started with different things. There's the Red Planet. It talks about how it's tied in to that other setting, and how some things from the Red Planet end up in the West here, in Arizona. There's lava tubes. There's what they call Sky Islands, which are mountains. There's an underworld to the setting here. Massive underworld for characters if you want to send them on an underworld adventure to go exploring for treasure, information, hunting, etc. Then we get into our first appendix. I love these. Appendices were made famous by Gary Gygax in the original first edition Monster Manual. Yeah? I love when games take that approach. Basically, with these appendices, they're going to add more detail and stuff to your game. So here we have a sort of detailed treatment on the Apache. We get 2 extra classes, the Medicine Man and the Apache Medicine Woman, sacred items that the Apache have, along with their legends and lore, their theology, their deities, etc. You get expanded ancestries for player creation. You get timeline of the Arizona during the Wild West starting at 1821 and going all the way to 1912. So that way it gives you an idea of game material, maybe specific things you want to take a look at. Overall helps you flesh out your setting as a game master or solo gamer. Appendix D is inventions. These inventions are not your weird science inventions, but instead inventions that would happen in these timelines, such as chewing gum, automobiles, fountain pens. Some of them are beyond that timeline. Light bulbs, grain elevators, transformers, typewriters, etc. But more of a mundane than sort of science fiction stuff. Over here we get various tables from rolling up your mount. It could be a horse, a mule, a donkey, a camel, etc. Gives you how they look, their color, their temperament, etc. As well as all your stats for the various ones so that you can work with it in game. You get an appendix on converting material, quite useful from other OSR systems. You get skills that you can add to your players. I highly recommend this. For me, I was running pen and paper and still ongoing a campaign that I really wanted to bring in elements of H.P. Lovecraft. Remember, a lot of his stories took place in the 1800s, so they fit right into this, other than they took place on the East Coast. Give it a more Western feel, and you can do that stuff. So one of the things I have was a lot of investigation and sort of detective work. Having skills to use along with those attribute checks can really flesh out your characters more. Notice that there was no detective or investigator. Quite easy to build one. Yeah? Over here you get one of my favorite things as a solo gamer or as a game master, random tables. All kinds of random tables. Sicknesses, exposure, ruins and temporary settlements, natural disasters, hunting results, town buildings, drugs, herbs and medicinal plants, desert terrain, elixirs, names for NPCs of various sorts, stuff like Gunslinger slogans, slang and sayings, things found in the desert, gang names, posse names, adventure hooks, etc. All that's very useful. Like I said, basically, at a very basic level, you can run this game solo just from this book with a decent oracle. You can get more detailed in your game if you want to add in some more generators, like an underground dungeon generator, a ruin generator, etc. Yeah? It's solo gaming's very hobby centric. The world is your oyster for it. Another appendice are historical personalities of the Wild West. Yeah? With their NPC blocks. Then we go into lingering injuries and wounds and such and how they affect the characters over time. Of course, just like Gary Gygax, you get the recommended reading list. Yeah? Then you get references and such. Then at the end, you got a character sheet for your horse. We're getting maps of the setting, towns, how buildings would look, etc. You can use these straight out or just get ideas from them. Yeah? And we come to the end of the book. Let me turn the camera back around, give you some final thoughts, and say farewell. All right, you ghouls and goblins, let me get a little root beer in me. Maybe I should call it a sarsaparilla since we're doing the Wild West theme, yeah? Anyway, like I said, I'm really impressed with this game. I'm really impressed with it as a one-book resource. Like I said, the Wild West or the Weird West isn't a genre I'm going to be visiting, that more than likely anyways, who knows, but as far as I can tell, it's not going to be a genre that I do a lot of visiting to. It's one of those things where, yes, some of my core library games could handle the Wild West setting. Yes, it could. But having a rule book as a one-book resource that's specifically geared toward the Wild West and the Weird West and such, I find it very useful and I'm very impressed with it. I don't have any major criticisms other than those ranges of weapons, ranged weapons. I don't have any major criticisms for the book. Yeah? It's like I said, I'm impressed with it as a one-book resource. If you're interested in the Wild West setting or Weird West setting, I highly recommend this. I know that this has been a long video, but these type games don't come around so often. And because it's from a smaller publisher, it may not get a ton of coverage. So I wanted to make sure it was fairly complete in what we did. Anyway. Yeah, another sip of sarsaparilla. I've been talking too long. I get on camera and I talk more to you guys than I talk to anybody else in the world. Other than maybe Thaddeus Maximus laughing on the phone all the time. Or Richard from the UK or somebody else. However we connect. Steve, Dungeon Dumbo, and different people. Yeah? But again, just a big shout out to the Random Encounter Army and our members Rogues Gallery. You guys are amazing. As I said in the last video, I am working diligently behind the scenes to make some big time things happen for our channel here. Yeah? Like I said, we're not going to announce anything just yet. I will be including you though once the process begins. I promise you, it's going to be big time for this channel. I promise you. Anyway, I hope you're all doing well. Don't forget, use the affiliate link down below if you're interested in Gunslinger. It comes with Deathstalker 5's recommendation. Also, make sure that if you're brand new here, hit the subscription button and check out our other parts of our community on Discord and Facebook. Again, links below. I'll see you guys next time here on the Random Encounter Show.
And this has been but one tale from the days of high adventure. You can join Deathstalker 5 on his quest by hitting that subscription button and joining his Random Encounter army. On the channel's About page, you will find our Facebook page and Facebook group where you can get more directly involved with the fun. And make sure you use our affiliate links to support our show.